Afternoon. This is John Pielli, Past Ball Show, of course, brought to you by johnpielli.com. Right now, I'm happy to be joined by a man that spent 11 years in the major leagues, won 93 games, and had the opportunity to play for 7 different teams, and that's Lary Sorensen. Larry, thanks for joining the program today.
My pleasure, John. Thank you.
Larry, you've obviously had an incredibly eventful life, which you are going to talk about in your upcoming book. Please let us know everything we can about your upcoming book.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm working on a book that will start from the early days because that's when my drinking problem started. I began drinking when I was 13 years old.
Wow.
And what I'd like to do is chronicle how I got to the point that I was in the major leagues while I was still drinking, and how life has progressed through that time period and into the period that I'm in now, where I have achieved a small level of sobriety, and I'm trying to get the message out to children and to parents about talking the problem over so that they can deal with it and the kids don't run through the same things that I had.
Speaking with you off air, something kind of resonated with me about the earliness or the age where children start to get the idea of drinking, start to learn about it a little bit, and there's a chance that you said that a child could start drinking maybe as early as like 10 years old.
Yeah, what the studies have shown is that the kids in the middle school are starting to reach out to alcohol, and it's becoming a factor in their lives. And the biggest thing is getting the parents to talk to the kids about it and make them aware of it. Kids have the peer pressure of their friends saying, we're doing this, you ought to give it a try, so on and so forth. But there's just a lot of information that isn't filtering back to that age of about 10 to 14, which is when they say that the kids start picking up these days. And in my particular instance, it was when I hit high school that I first really was exposed to it and started dealing regularly with alcohol. And it was a problem really until I reached the age of about 57. So
Wow.
it's an ongoing problem through life. I ended up spending some time in prison, about 3.5 years in prison because of it. And I know that it affected my major league career. I know it affected my life afterwards.
Now, we spend a lot of time talking about the importance of good parenting, and obviously that is very important. But when you talk about something such as alcoholism or drug abuse or anything that involves an addictive type of personality, it takes a little more than just having the perfect parents that are there all the time.
Well, a great friend of mine once said that the things that made me so good were what made me so bad as well, because you take things to excess. When you're an athlete, when you're driven to perform at a certain level, you have that within you that drives you to achieve the goals that you finally achieve. And so you take it to the other aspects of your life and it becomes a problem for you. Parenting is a difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing in this day and age, but it always has been.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that I'm trying to achieve and the goal that I have is to open up some lines of communication for parents to understand that before the problem gets to be too late, before their kids run into unnecessary situations they might have avoided, they can have conversations with them and point out some of the perils and pitfalls when you start drinking at an early age.
Now, I tell you, you look back at obviously alcoholism has been around forever. And I spent a lot of time in this program talking about the history of baseball. We can talk about the history of alcohol if you want, because it, the impacts it had on people's lives through many different generations. But the one thing that I do want to stress, and I think it's very important, is just to for kids to understand it. There's always a place for them to go. Their parents may be at work. They may have a single family, with a split household where their father isn't around or something like that. But there is always somebody that is willing to listen if you're willing to talk about certain problems and questions you have at age 10 or 11. Like, why is a friend of mine drinking? Mm-hmm. And maybe the best way to keep the influence from getting to them, but also the education to understand what is good and what's best for them down the road.
As with most things, communication is the big key, because once you start reaching out and talking about it with people that have more experience and more knowledge about it, and the more you find out about it, the better you can deal with it. I'm not preaching abstention. I don't think that you can never go through life without having a drink. I think that people are wired differently, and science is proving, and doctors are doing the studies to show that the genetics inside of us react differently to ethyl alcohol when you put it into your system. In my situation, it reacts to that I want more. As soon as I put it into my system, I want more. And I wasn't able to stop myself. And so the choice is not stopping. The choice is not picking up the first drink. In my particular situation, not everybody is wired the same way. People can handle more, people can handle less. What we are trying to do is establish some lines of communication to get kids talking about it with teachers, with their parents, with people that have a little bit more experience and knowledge about it, so that it doesn't become a problem with them and they get into trouble with law, or they get into trouble with unwanted pregnancies, or they get into different situations that lead them to drug situations, and their life just spirals before they even get a start at it.
Larry, do you remember the day of your first drink?
It was a football game in my high school my freshman year, and I bottle of Boone's Farm apple wine made me sicker than a dog, and I'll never forget it. And really, I'm now undergoing the most continued sobriety. I'm coming up on 4 years without having had a drink that I've had my entire life. And life has expanded exponentially with goodness, and I feel blessed that to have gotten past some of the dark days, because I had a couple of near-death situations that I managed somehow to get by. And so I'm just trying to do what little I can to try to make kids aware that they have to address this situation.
Now, looking back on, obviously, your struggle with alcoholism, which obviously spanned over a course of many decades, did you ever feel like either, and this is going to be a two-part question, did you ever feel like you had any control over what it is that you were doing, that if you had decided at one point that you just simply didn't want to, that you could have, or was the addiction so much in your head that wasn't even a thought?
Well, the problem, John, is that I did think I had control.
Okay.
And I found out that I wasn't a very good captain of my own ship. And I found out that I couldn't control things as well as I thought that I was. And, being a former pitcher, known for his control, I always felt like I was in command of the situation. And with alcohol, I felt the same way. And what I came to realize is that it had taken over my life to the point of all I thought of was where my next drink was going to come from. And if that meant not paying the entire rent or not paying the entire electric bill so that I could have the money to buy my bottle of alcohol, that was what I did for a long period of time. And I isolated from society. I lost my family for a while because of it, was divorced because of it. And fortunately, those things are coming back into my life, and the goodness is coming back into life. But an awful lot of things were lost along the way because I couldn't control my problem with alcohol.
So, talking about the control that you didn't have, as it impacts you, is there a time that you remember saying, this thing has overwhelmed me to a point where you actually saw some of the things that were happening and felt that because of that lack of control, you wish you could change it, but you couldn't change it. It was just spiraling too far out of control.
Absolutely saw the results of it on a very regular basis and could see life spiraling, but just couldn't quite pull the trigger to stop it because I kept thinking I could do it by myself. I was the macho man. I was the big-time athlete that could control everything, and found out that I couldn't. And I lost so many different things because I got myself into situations that I just couldn't get myself out of. I mentioned the prison stay. I spent 3.5 years in prison, and there were 6 DUIs involved with that. Fortunately, I never hurt anybody and never killed anybody, and it was just I kept drinking and driving. And it was just a miracle that nothing ever happened because of those situations. There are a lot of things, a lot of nights, and if you're caught 6 times, it means there's 600 or 6,000 times that you were driving and you could have been.
Oh, of course.
And in this day and age, you can't get away with it anymore, which is a good thing. And the biggest thing is giving yourself a chance in life before you get to the point where you've dug a hole so deep you feel like you can't get out of it.
Larry, the question I want to ask you is, you hit a certain point of your life. You are following things that are spiraling out of control. Things are going negatively in your life. But there's one moment that sticks out to you, because that's when you decide that it's time to make a change. There's a time where it finally comes to you and you say, there's no way you could live this lifestyle anymore. Tell us a little bit about that moment and how it came about.
Well, I'd gotten to a point, a parole agent told me one time, he said, Mr. Sorensen, you are destined to die by yourself in an apartment with no friends, surrounded by vodka bottles, and somebody will find you laying there all by yourself. And I got near that point in Christmas of about 2013. And we went to, in 2014, early 2014, we went to a friend's house in West Lafayette, Indiana, and I was drinking along the way, had hidden a bottle with me, and I had an alcoholic seizure. I fell and cracked my head on the bathtub, cracked their bathtub, in fact, when I fell. And my fiance was with me, who was a nurse, and they got me to a hospital, and I spent 4 days in the hospital, and that was a point where I said, this has got to stop. And I knew that I was going to lose her, and now she's my wife of almost 4 years. And that was the point where I said, this has got to stop. And it was January 27th of 2014 that I had my last drink until today, at least as of this moment. And all I have to do is get through today, and I'll worry about tomorrow and the alcohol tomorrow, but I just got to get through today.
Well, listen, the message is obviously out for a lot of people to try to learn from, your experiences. So what would be the best message you would have to a kid or a young man or a young woman, or even an older man or older woman, somebody that has identified that there is a problem and they want to think of the best way to change it?
Well, and it happens, it can happen with the kids seeing the message and taking it to their parents. Because as I talk around the country at different places, I have kids that come up to me and say, that's my dad, that's my uncle, that's my mom, that they're seeing the same symptoms of what I talk about. And it got to the point where, it wasn't that I wanted to die. It's just I didn't care if I lived.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see any future for myself. I didn't see anything ever pulling me out of it. And finally, getting some abstinence from alcohol and sobriety did it for me. The big thing is talk about it. Reach out for help. If you feel yourself as a child, if you've experimented and you liked it, and you found that it brought you out of your shell because it made you a little bit of a different person. Maybe you're having trouble fitting in at school. You don't think you've got friends. Talk to people about it. Talk to adults. Go to your school counselor. Go to your parents. Your parents, the studies all show, are still the people that the kids believe most. A lot of parents think it's peer pressure and it's other kids that their kids respond to, and it's not. The kids all say that their parents are their final source on things. But it's hard getting that conversation started. So you've got to talk. You've got to talk it out and talk to family and friends or pastor or teacher, favorite teacher, counselor, whoever it might be. Go and get yourself some help before it ever gets to be a problem.
I learned from a wise man that if you ever ask for advice, the odds of being shot down in regards to the request of somebody's opinion
absolutely
is minimal. You may catch somebody in a bad mood, but outside of that if you're asking for somebody's opinion on something, they're going to give it. So, there are many people that are out there, whoever it is, whether it's, if it's not your parent or a friend or, maybe it's a friend's parent, maybe it's somebody at school like a teacher, maybe it's somebody that you feel comfortable with, somebody you've built up some sort of rapport and relationship with. Just ask them a question. And you know what? I guarantee you they will give you their answer, whatever that answer is.
Or a hotline. If you
Yes.
want to stay completely anonymous in something,
Yes.
call a hotline. There are so many, and in this day and age with the internet, there are so many good sources of information that you can find, and there are good programs around that you can talk to people about it at all ages, because this spans from kids all the way up to, before you're put into the grave. So it's a problem in society. It can be done responsibly, no question about that. But there are people that have problems and don't know about it until they feel like it's too late.
No, very true. And last, before we go, a little bit more on your book and when people might have the opportunity to read it.
Well, it's still a work in progress. I'm hoping that sometime by the holidays next year we'll have it finished up. I'm writing it with a gentleman named Keith Gave, who was a beat writer for the Detroit Free Press and the Dallas Morning News, that just finished up a hockey book about the Russian Five. Terrific writer, very talented guy, and has some empathy for the situation that I've been through. And I've known him for a long time, good friend, and we're just going to try to put enough information in it so that we can help people make the decision that they can go out and get some help.
Did you come up with a name yet?
Not yet. It's a work in progress.
I bet you at some point it's just going to hit you in the head. It's probably going to be pretty clicky, and it's going to be good.
It will.
Larry, I really appreciate the time, man.
Thank you,
very
John.
much.
Appreciate it.